Hey everybody, welcome to the Friday Hangout. This is the show where we talk about digital marketing and all kinds of amazing things with fabulous guests we find fascinating. And this week we've got Frank Strong and we've got Steve Winking. And we're really happy to have you, Frank, because you come back so often. You've been a great guest, and we always love having you on the show. So.
We figured out that you are Alec Baldwin.
Yeah, so why is that? First, thank you for having me back.
He looks a little like Alec Baldwin.
Really?
No, in the sense of not really. The Alec Baldwin is like the most returned guest from Saturday Night Live, and you've been on the show more than. The disclaimer is you've actually been a guest and a host, so maybe that's a little cheating, but you've been on the show more than anyone else.
Wow. Can I have a badge for my blog?
You sure can. You can be the fourth Beatle or fifth Beatle or whatever.
The fifth Beatle, yeah.
Oh, did you tell Alec Baldwin about his record?
Hey, there's Adam. Well, and in case you don't know who Frank is, he is the communications director of LexisNexis Business of Law Software Solutions. Say that 3 times fast. And he's been a frequent guest on the show, and we're here to talk about the future of communication.
I'm not sure how to respond to that, Steve.
Steve, why don't you tell people who you are and say hello?
Hi, hello. I am Steve Farnsworth, Steveology on Twitter, and the author of the Steveology blog and said products.
Products?
Said product. Steve is a product in himself. And we also have the amazing Adam Helway with us today. At last.
Amazing enough that we have discussions about starting on time quite frequently, and this was the one time I was on time, and then I show up and I'm like, oh, chitty chatty, and I find out you guys are already live. How's it going, Janet?
We're doing great.
I'm glad I didn't say anything stupid at all when I jumped on. Hey Frank, how you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Good to see you. Good to see you.
As always, I like your sword.
Thank you. Excuse, that's not an inside joke at all, guys. There's a sword here on the video. Just watch the video. You'll know what he's talking about.
It actually just looks like you have horns, so that's all good.
Hey, are we going to jump into this or what?
No, I don't think so. I think we're just going to chit-chat for maybe an hour or so and see what's going on.
I got questions. I have needs.
Do you want to take the first question then, Steve? Because I know that you've got burning questions for Frank.
I do, but I think that I'll take the softball question because there are a few folks who probably don't understand what paid, earned, owned is, and so Frank, if you could kind of give us a brief overview of what each of those are.
That's a great place to start.
Sure, I'll take Forrester's definitions and then I'll modify them a little bit because I see things slightly differently. So owned is very simple. It is a channel that a brand owns or controls. A good example of that is a website, a blog, those sorts of sites that you have definitive control. Paid media, I think people traditionally think of that in terms of advertising, and when people say advertising, they think print, they think video, but I think paid media is a better description because it also includes things like PPC and social advertising and sort of these new ways to advertise that have evolved in the last 2 years. Earned media, that's the quintessential bailiwick of a public relations pro. Traditionally, that would be media relations and earning press or headlines or coverage on broadcast stations. I think earned media today has evolved in this world of user-generated content, and that anytime a brand is mentioned and there has been no exchange of money, that the idea is shared merely on its own merits, then that is earned media. And then those are the 3 definitions that Forrester gives. I think there's one other that they miss. One of the guys that's a big advocate of that is Lee Odin, who I know has been on this show. He calls it shared media. Shared media refers to social media, sites like Twitter, Facebook, so on and so forth. Now Forrester lumps that into owned media, and I don't think that's a good example because you don't own it. You don't own, for example, a Posterous account, which I used for, 2 or 3 years and had 300 blog posts before they shuttered. So that's why I think it's important to draw a distinction between owned and shared.
So what does that mean to a communications professional? Why do we care about those distinctions, and how do we relate to that?
Well, because I think there's different ways that you can leverage them and use them for your specific function, whatever it is, whatever your goals and metrics, KPIs that you're supposed to achieve in your world. All of these things can be leveraged in different ways to earn those. I come at things, for example, from, as you know, a PR perspective, and so obviously I'm big into earned media. I think I do a pretty good job at it, but also looking at ways to leverage paid media to earn media, to leverage owned media to earn media, and then the combination of the two to earn media.
Okay.
Well, actually, like to I was going to just jump back only to the, I tell me why we need to separate. To me, a social channel like Twitter or any of the other social channels is owned media, and there's no reason for a distinction. Why do you think there's a need for distinction? I don't see the reasoning behind that.
Well, I think you need to have a distinction for a couple of reasons. The first one is simply the control over it. So you can contribute to any one of these sites, but they could be gone tomorrow. If you were to pull in a news hook, a big fan of authorship, that's gone, right? Posterous, if you use that as a primary platform, it was gone. Right?
Gone without your control, right?
Gone without your control.
It's
right?
not like somebody internally just said we'd like to dissolve this, but an outside force, it's gone.
Okay, sure, but what does that have to do with the price of tea in China?
Well, I think we put things in categories and buckets. I don't know that it has anything to do with the price of tea in China, but I think it's important for people to understand how to use these, right, and how to leverage them. And I think we need to think about them in different ways. And then how do you weave them all together?
And Steve, are you specifically jumping on the shared versus the owned?
I think Frank, with all due respect, I think you're making up things more complicated than they need to be. And let me be real clear, Frank could kick my ass really bad, so we're really distantly very far apart, so I'd only say this over Google Hangout. But I just don't think there's a difference. I mean, I understand that difference, but I don't think it affects how a marketer shares. What we're talking about, and I think this is way too in the weeds now, is that you have the ability to post onto that channel as this way you have to publish on a blog post, and that's just that control. So, but the reality.
I was just gonna riff off of, and I'm joking because I know that Steve is also playing a little bit of the devil's advocate, even though it's in line with A's thinking. So I hope Frank is too, or else you're in deep trouble, Steve.
Frank takes me with a grain of salt all the time.
But I think I even asked it in the chat is how do you categorize something like a social channel, even though normally it would be thought of as owned media. Just because of that real estate being somebody else's real estate, I think shared is a really interesting way of saying it, not necessarily to differentiate anything, in my opinion, more, and Frank, this is what sort of I got from what you said, not to differentiate anything any more than sort of the mental understanding of ownership of that particular platform and having a clear understanding that we actually do not own this, that this is completely temporary land that at any point in time could shift or dissolve and go away, and that was really the point, correct?
Yeah, and I think that would be the second point that I would draw in, not just the control factor, but you take it, for example, Twitter. You don't in any way own that, right? That is a contribution. That is a community in the true sense of a community. A blog, now you can say, look, you don't control message anymore, your customers control message, but if you have a blog, you can moderate comments. You can control the content that you publish to that. On Twitter, you put something out, and it could go any which way, sideways. Maybe nobody pays attention to it. In many ways, people struggle to even get attention on Twitter or to have their ideas recognized.
Yeah, so let's talk a little. Steve's just shaking his head. Let's talk about, though, how that flows, because, okay, so maybe you have some own media. Maybe you make a blog post, right? But how are you going to get it shared? Are you going to use paid in order to get those shares? And how does that process flow, in order to get your word out there?
So I think we can do this a couple different ways. One, I look at from an earned media perspective, I'm going to use paid media to target and get in front of reporters, right? Twitter is a great example. You can target people by handle. So I can look at folks that cover a particular trade and beat. I did this week. Had a study that came out, target relevant reporters. Oftentimes I'll do it with bloggers, especially if I don't know them very well, or it's somebody that I'm trying to get to know well. It's a very passive way to put that information in front of them. If they're interested, they'll click. And of course, Twitter is pretty good analytics, so you have a really good sense of who's actually looking at it. And then if they do in fact write about it or they contact you, you have the beginning of a relationship. Same thing with owned. Owned you can use in the same way. It's just merely a combination. So maybe that's your platform that you've published whatever study or great content or compelling idea on that owned platform, and then you're using the paid media channel to get that in front of people. But I think there's also a flip side to that, sort of putting this on its head. And one of the companies that does this well, or at least has written about it, is Shift Communications, where they talk about, look, every time we get a good earned media placement, we put the full tilt on paid media, primarily I think in social channels, to make sure that that message gets full saturation. So I think it can come at things from both sides.
So just in case people don't know, it's if you've never, as a marketer, if you've never actually done some promoted tweets and you don't know what that is, you really should get a budget from your boss and play with promoting some stuff. It makes much more sense when you do it, but that's actually really clever. Is one thing Shift is really good at is they actually will take content that they create and use Facebook or PPC, pay-per-click, or promoted tweets to get it in front of people, just like Frank's talking about. I love this idea of a post on the backside promoting when you get that coverage. I mean, that's a stroke of genius. It's not that hard. All it is, you go in, you basically you tweet something, like you're using Twitter, you tweet something, and then you go in, you pay to have that show up in people's streams, either by their Twitter handle or somebody they follow, or by a hashtag or keyword they use. It's fairly easy to do, but you should practice and try it. It's a great technique.
Well, we use that technique with our blogger campaigns all the time. We'll find the best blogger who blogged about the product, and then we'll support them with paid media. We may find 5 bloggers and support them with paid media. So we're actually supporting a sponsored post as opposed to our own media. And that's a really effective way to kind of enhance that message and get other people sharing it and build the momentum of the content.
It's really not a new strategy. There are new tools to do this, but this sort of thing has existed forever. For example, in 1999, if you got a front page placement, or a placement, let's just call it a placement in the Wall Street Journal, what did people do? They went out and they got reprints, right? Nice, slick, 8.5 by 11, copy. It's all on one page, and they'll put that in direct mail. Or maybe they'll turn that into an actual advertisement that they will then use in another publication. Mm-hmm. You see the logos on sites today, right? As covered on MSNBC.com, as covered at Fox News. So it's really an adaptation using these new tools to do things that we have done all along.
So I'm a metaphor guy. I like to find ways of encapsulating some concept into a metaphor for folks to picture in their head. And so when I've often thought of the earned, paid, and owned, I thought of it as a boat. You've got a boat, your brand, your message, whatever it is, you're in that boat. And owned is you've got the oars out and you guys are stroking with the oars and propelling that message, propelling your brand. Then you want to amplify it with paid, which is limited by budget and that sort of thing. That's your motor you throw on the back. It can propel you forward real quickly, but it also burns out your budget over time, right? So you've got a limited amount of time, something like gas or something. And then lastly, you've got the earned, which essentially is the wind. You've got some external force pushing you and continuing to propel you forward, and using those to your advantage in different ways to get that message to a destination. I don't know if that works, if that metaphor works. It's something I've been playing around with. Does that sound on point at all, Frank, or does that sound like I'm missing something?
Yeah, I think it's a good metaphor. Metaphors are useful for trying to understand where things are going.
And bottom line is, it's all the same boat. It's just you're propelling it in different ways, and there's advantages and disadvantages. And of course, the more organic that you can have it, the better in a lot of different ways. The social proof aspect of it, the lower the cost, all those sorts of elements play in, of course, in that way.
So I think it brings. Sorry, Steve. I think it brings into like the next evolution of the conversation, right? So I have not seen a lot of PR people that I know using paid tactics to target influencers, right? The first guy. Yeah. What's that?
PR people don't do that work. They hire companies to do it,
And really, modern communications person should really understand all those components. Let's talk specifically about what integrating paid, earned, owned looks like. Can we get into that a bit more for a PR person or comms person or for anybody in content marketing?
Yeah, well, I think it's the combination of all of the different functions, right? From SEO to direct to did we lose Janet?
No, she's
No, I'm here.
From direct and SEO and paid and earned and moving those getting all of those different functions aligned so that you're all moving towards the same goal. So traditionally the SEO might be working in their silo and they're working on keywords and they're trying to get links for those keywords, but PR is often La La Land doing the brand fluffy stuff, and then you have direct marketing and they're going off with their one-off offers, 20% off discounts, and these things aren't working in a unified strategy. Go ahead.
I was going to say, let's actually talk about, let's say we decided, the Friday Hangout decided to do an ebook on paid, earned, owned. Okay, so we're doing this, and so we go, wow, we got a great ebook. And so when you're talking about bringing everybody together, we're talking about, let's kind of, what am I forgetting here? So you're talking about SEO. So what does that mean when I have this book? So how do I connect with the SEO folks? I got the book.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So you say bring in SEO.
Mm-hmm.
So I created the book. What does bringing in SEO mean?
Bringing in SEO, so understanding what the objectives are that they're trying to achieve, or better yet, identifying the overall goal for the organization, and then aligning the objectives of each of those functions to meet that goal. So SEO has a play in terms of the types of links they're trying to gain, the types of keywords that they're optimizing, maybe or even targeting for PPC. Does that make sense? Yeah.
So it'd be taking that book and saying to who specializes that within the company or who my advisor is to say, what am I not thinking? Here's the piece. What can I be given? What our goals are around our keywords for the website and for this book. What should I change in terms of some of the H1, the tags, some of the wording?
I think even at that point, Steve, I think even the SEO folks, it would be that likely they would be driving the SEO strategy, so the keywords that the folks are using within the book should reflect what has already been established by the folks on the SEO side, and so rather than at least in my experience with SEO, what we do with our clients, that it would sort of come from having a clear understanding of SEO-wise, what are the goals, and then therefore making sure that those are in line with the piece of content as well, or the language used to market that content and get the word out in that specific silo, so to speak.
So let's actually talk about paid. So we got this book, and we want to do some paid stuff. Bring it back to what you were telling us. What are we going to do with for our paid stuff, Frank?
Yeah, so from my perspective, I would take that ebook and break it up into a series of blog posts, right, and use those on my own media channels. And then I would take those blog posts, and of course I would put that into paid social ads, right? You can use let's take Twitter for example. You can target by keywords, which works very much like a traditional pay-per-click model. But you can also target individual users. So if there's a story that you're after, maybe you pull out one of your posts out of the ebook is based on the statistics that you have, right? And those statistics are very valuable for bloggers and for reporters that are looking to validate or support particular stories that they are working on. You can target those particular handles. So that starts to bring that full circle. The keywords like that Adam mentioned earlier, right? You're including those in your post. You've already got those in mind. I don't ever think you force fit keywords in, but you ought to have them in top of mind. They're probably already in the ebook. You probably already see them on your content. Does that get after what you're
absolutely. So let's just take the last little piece of this group. We're talking, let's talk about how if we're not PR, we want to bring PR into this process. What can we look to PR to do to help promote this asset?
Well, I think turn it into a contributed article, a contributed blog post. You can certainly use your own channels, which you ought to do. Then go back in terms of repurposing and maybe do a combination. So if I've pitched and secured 5 different guest posts based on different pieces of the ebook, maybe I pull those all together into 5 key takeaways, linking back to all those original posts on my owned media. right? And you just keep building on it and building on it.
I would even, you've seen folks that do things like taking assets out of studies or infographics and that sort of thing, and getting placement in media publications that are relevant. Again, going back to say the full study or where some more information is. I've seen that happen quite often.
Yeah, and each step along the way is an opportunity to use paid again, right? And you have to decide what are the benefits and drawbacks. Is this post particularly worth it? If I got a guest post on the Steveology blog, is that something that I want to pay for advertising?
Well, yeah.
I mean, it may not be. Right? If I'm driving, if I do that, then it's helping me and my brand, but I'm also driving traffic to that blogger. That's the essence of relationship building.
And the one thing that I would say is, like you talked about, the model you talked about is the one that most people do, is they create the asset and then they figure out the things they can make from it backwards. I personally think that's backwards, because I think that most of the derivative pieces come off like redheaded stepchildren to some degree. And so what I'm a big fan of doing is, if you plan that book out in advance of the pieces you're going to have, you can do the interviews, the videos, the podcasts, the blog posts as original content creation, and then assemble those into the ebook. And so you have all that stuff on the front end building up to that ebook, and you can then go back and promote the ebook and all those pieces if you plan it in advance.
I'd say, Steve, that the opportunity that brings, because at first when you were first saying it, I was saying, it's can make things a little difficult to do it that way. And then as you kept going, I think I'm in agreement with you. Is it can go either way, but even more so, the opportunity that it has when you create all those individual pieces is the opportunity. You're having a hard time with your cat over there?
Yeah.
I think the opportunity that you have, Steve, with that is to actually make a richer, say, ebook or a richer, larger experience, because now you've got a multimedia experience. You've created all these individual pieces that you can integrate into a much richer experience that includes video and includes some sort of derivative pieces that all feed back to the same place. Janet, we keep talking over you. Your cat
no,
keeps
you're not at all. I think I'd like to take this to some more tangible examples. So let's talk about some real world applications of how that works. I know Frank, you and Steve are all loaded up with some good examples.
I could give you one that I've actually worked on this week, and I think it's a good example. I do want to come back one comment on Steve's post. Well, I'll hit that up later. But so the example is, we do surveys. We do surveys a lot, right? And we do them for market research. We do them because they add value to the community. They help them understand a particular idea, and we do them because it's a conversation starter, right? So we conducted a survey. We paid a third-party media outlet to survey their base. We did all of the research in-house, used SurveyMonkey, simple tool, did the analysis. I came up with a PowerPoint presentation, right? And the PowerPoint presentation goes onto SlideShare. It is embedded in a blog post. We add a press release that goes out over PR Web. It all links back, and we're pitching both the blog and the press release. At the same time, I've got paid media going both for the blog post itself and for the press release. That's kind of my A/B test, and I've done keywords and targeted on both pieces of assets. So I really got 4 different paid advertising campaigns going on, and I'm just kind of looking at which one's going best. At the same time, the survey surfaces a problem. They usually do, right? You're asking questions about things, and we haven't quite solved that. But this particular question it has to deal with lawyers, particularly solo and duo law firms, have a real hard time asking clients for money, right? And they're having all of these past due accounts, right? So the next logical step is to create a whole bunch of content around how do you solve for that, right? It's very simple. There's software tools that will do analysis, right? So you can understand your client base, and then you try to go after those clients with profiles that tend to be in good standing, right? There's tips and techniques, there's processes that you can put in place. So we can develop a whole list of content around that. And then what we will probably do later is that'll probably be a series of blog posts. We'll take that and package it up into a white paper, right? And the cycle will probably repeat, but you'll also have the added arm of direct marketing put behind it, right? And our email lists, which are enormous. That's my example. Is it?
I think that's a great example. The whole process, I like to see how the the flow works. I think that's really good for our
That
viewers.
that whole process is something we've done now 4 times, right? It's one of the things that I brought in my toolkit, brought into the company because I want to have these sort of process-oriented methods, right? And you know, everybody's got a piece in it, right? We've got a creative team, they've got the graphics and the white paper. We've got a direct marketing team, they've got the email pitch letters. The SEO and I are talking on a daily basis, right? So everybody's got a piece in it, and it's very process-oriented, right? Everybody knows exactly what's going to happen. They know exactly the type of assets that are going to come out in the tail end. And then to Steve's point, there's a sophisticated marketing organization can look and plan all of these posts ahead of time. In our case, I think we, you know, on the process maturity curve, you know, we're probably medium, but we're sort of building them as we go and then realizing, wow, we have all these great tools, we can bundle these together, and that makes a nice package.
That's where that automation part comes in, where you're still not really, you know, it's not negative automation where it's just thoughtless. You're actually planning things out and figuring out how it's all going to pull together, and I think that's really awesome.
And if I could, because this is a good opportunity to circle back on the comment I wanted to make about Steve's point. His point earlier was like, look, a lot of companies are doing this backwards. They ought to plan this out in advance. And I can tell you, from a large marketing organization perspective, that is really hard because you're so caught up in the fight on a day-to-day, and it's all you can do to get what you're doing done. So, and you know, not necessarily just to throw a plug out there, but that is a good opportunity to go out and hire a consultant, right? To go out and get somebody that produces, yeah, I know, thumbs up. But realistically, when you look at the available resources that a company has and how you're going to allocate those resources for the maximum effect, that's a good opportunity to go out and get a consultant and help you think through that.
Well, and that's really what they do, but it's also part of, you know, I talk to people about this all the time, that this is how you're efficient, you know, by planning this properly and getting all your content ducks in a row so that you can actually make this happen. And yeah, sure, hire a consultant to help you with that, but, you know, just get your ducks in a row and you're much more efficient, and then you have time to actually engage and create relationships. Anybody else before we go to the next round? No?
I just, and listening to it, I think one thing the phrase we haven't said, which really plays into this, is this. Much of this is the same model as simply what everybody's calling content marketing right now, right? I mean, creating the assets, amplifying the assets, getting SEO on board with that and everything, and really in the end what PR's role plays in it. So I think a lot of people, if they've been listening to us in the past, will go, well, that sounds an awful lot like content marketing, and that's not the phrase that they've said there. And so it shows that this stuff is all interrelated and not unlike what it's been for some time.
I think that's absolutely right. Like, integrated marketing is a term that makes people's eyes glaze over, but it's not new. It's been around forever. And this whole web dynamic is really, it's been forcing that for the last several years, and we're really seeing it starting to happen. It has to.
Well, and I'm really tired of hearing the phrase content marketing too. I mean, I think, these things are evolving into what's normal for business when health freezes over and we're all dead. Moving right along, I kind of want to, thanks a lot, Frank. I think there was some really great information here. And I'd like to kind of carry this on into the share section of the show. And I know you and Adam both want to talk about Google Authorship, so let's start there. Adam, why don't you go?
Yeah. So I heard Frank allude to it, and I was like, please don't steal my thunder. And he didn't. So something I'm actually really surprised on is that Google has decided to discontinue their authorship in search results, and in general that means, my understanding is it means authorship in general is going bye-bye. And what authorship is, and funny is I noticed this before it got on a lot of people's radar, at least I think so. A number of years ago I did a blog post about how this was going to be a pretty big thing, that Google was actually sort of persuading folks to connect their Google Plus account with some code to all the content that they were writing across the many blogs or publications that they were on using authorship code, and that they would eventually be able to rank authors in the same way that they might rank pages or bring attention to certain authors and add social proof to search engine results, because now they know who was writing one or more articles across the entire web. And so the way that they had implemented it initially was in search results you would see potentially people you were connected with on Google Plus or whatever, but you would see the photo of the author of a particular post and maybe a little information about how many connections they had on Google Plus, but they never said that it influenced the ranking. It was really more just about visibility. And they finally just announced, I don't know about you guys, but every client that I worked with, I encouraged them to do this, if only for a little bit more visibility. And a lot of other people I know were doing the same thing. It took a little bit of initial sort of know-how to get going, and it says that there was a number of reasons why this just didn't work out. They were trying to unify mobile, the mobile experience and overall experience of their search, and adding authorship to mobile was just not a real easy thing to do visually. They said that there wasn't a large payoff for users of the search engine, and so therefore that was sort of another downside. And overall, the adoption showed, like, they on Search Engine Land, which we'll link to, 500 authors across 150 major websites were sort of studied, and it showed that 48% of them had no profile in Google Plus, which is required to make this happen. 22% had a profile but didn't link to any of their publications, so that therefore there was no authorship implemented. And only 30% of them actually did have one or more sites linked and accounted for in their profile. So there was only a third of folks that were actually implementing it out of the 50 or so folks. So the adoption was really low. There's a lot of other great numbers here, but bottom line is, in my world, I was really surprised because I thought a heck of a lot more people were going for this, and I thought there'd be a bigger payoff, and now they're just sort of nixing it. What do you guys think, Frank?
Yeah, I mean, I have two real thoughts. First, I think it's a darn shame. I think it's a really good idea because there's a lot of noise on the web. Like, just the idea, forget what happened and how it was implemented. The idea of identifying authoritative authors that provide useful content to people is a great idea. Secondly, I was a big advocate of Google Authorship. I've written several posts on it. I've connected with other people that have written about it. Very interested in it. And one of the things that I was really surprised by is the amount of "I told you so" kind of posts. Like, why did you guys do this? You knew it was going away. And my perspective is, look, at the end of the day, you're talking about a photo and a byline appearing in search results. Search is a new front page. That's great for visibility, right? We never got to author ranking. They hadn't gone down that path yet.
Yeah.
And what did it take? It took a little code on your website. What is the big? And it happened for 3 years. This wasn't a 2-week experiment. It was 3 years that it happened. So you had those benefits. So, you know, I don't think anybody that endorsed authorship should be hanging their head in shame that they got this wrong. I think it was a good idea, and marketers need to experiment with this stuff, right? The web is dynamic, and if you want to work in the field of marketing or content or any of those related industries, and you are not prepared for things to change at a drop of a hat tomorrow, then you're in the wrong business, because that's the way it's going to be.
Amen to that, brother. Amen to that. I mean, anybody who would poo-poo you for trying something out is an idiot. That's how people are like, oh no, you don't need to do that, and they become irrelevant.
Well, that's that
what's
internet
the alternative?
trend, right?
What's the alternative when you say poo-poo to trying something out? It's not like they said this was potentially going to be. We're not talking about McDonald's new burger that they say is out for a limited time. Let's go get it, and it's going to be gone in a month. This is something that in all you know, what do you want to say? Everything pointed to the fact that it was a permanent thing that was going to happen, and so nobody knew it was going to be temporary. Neither, like Frank said, we don't know tomorrow if Facebook's going to change the whole frickin', you know, feed page or the pages that they have as well. So,
or if they're going to change out Hangouts every time you log in.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Before we wrap up, though, I'd love to hear Janet and Steve your thoughts on the Google Authorship. I know we're close on time, but I really want to hear what you guys have to say.
Well, I'll tell you mine pretty quickly. I mean, I thought it was really great. I thought it was a great way for authors to highlight themselves and to connect their different blogs. And, you know, I was syndicated in a couple of places that actually required it if you wanted to be syndicated by those blogs. And now they're going to have to reroute that. So it's caused some issues there. I liked it. I thought it was great. But I also have to say that it's a classic example of Google not really planning very well. You know, they've come up with so many things that they've put out and then gone, oh, yeah, we have to integrate that with this and that. How do you do this
with planning, Janet?
Well, because, for example, it doesn't integrate well with mobile. Nobody thought of that. Why didn't they think of that? You know, those
Well,
kind of things are classic Google. Oh, geez. Well, no, just scrap the whole thing. We're out of
and the
here.
other thing, I think they're so butthurt over this whole kind of Google Plus debacle, with everybody, with the staff leaving and stuff, and Google Plus is really in question, and they're backtracking all of this stuff. And it was poorly planned on the front end, and it's poorly handled, in my opinion, on the back end. And there's no plan or vision about where to go. It's just like, oh, you know what, we screwed up, and we're moving on. It's like, well, moving on to what? So I don't know. I mean, I don't think there's a consequence for the Google authorship thing. It's a disappointment that they're like looking for a better solution, a better way of. Hold on, Adam. It's gonna be. You're gonna be there in a second. No, it's just disappointed that they're not going. Hey, you know, we're gonna, you know, this is not working as well as we'd like, so we're gonna try this now. There's no vision now. It's like,
Well, it's a lot easier to do if you're doing it on your own personal blog, but you know, if you're Google and you're doing it, then it makes a much bigger splash.
The important thing that I think Steve's comment reminded me of is that in the past, when everybody was talking about Google Plus going away, I kept saying no, because the bottom line is it plays an important part in the authorship stuff. And Steve just reminded me now that if authorship goes away, it actually makes Google Plus far less important to the bottom line, which is Google search.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Well, I'm sorry, finish your thought.
No, that's it. That's it.
Okay, so here's why I don't think Google Plus is going away. Because it's integrated with search, but it's also integrated with shopping, and it's integrated with Google Places. And so all of those things together are really kind of supporting each other.
you're right. I misspoke. I agree. I think that it's not going to go. That they're basically abandoning the team that was supporting it.
Well, I say, yeah, and I say that because I actually have a blog post on my desktop right now from an event that I was at yesterday where 90% of the people said, Google Plus? No, nobody uses it. Well, nobody uses it because we're using circles, which is how it was created, and there was a reason for that. So, you know, I have a really good rant going on that one, but I'm gonna spare you. I'm gonna spare you, and I know you have a new share too.
I actually have two shares. I'm surprised that you guys didn't do it. The first one is actually Instagram hyperlapse.
Played with it, love it. We'll use
It's
it over and over.
So we'll find. I'll find a link to. I'll find a link to a couple of videos. But fundamentally, what it does is it takes a series of snapshots. Like, so, if you do this kind of stuff where things are moving, like if you're doing kind of going through time and space, like following somebody, and you have to have special equipment to do that normally. So what they've done is they've created an algorithm in Instagram that allows you to take these individual pictures over time. It tries to then it tries to stitch those together and stabilize the image. So you can have these images that kind of like come in and do this kind of really cool stuff. And you have to say it's a fun application, and you can do some really cool stuff. So I'll find a link. We'll share that on the page. The other thing is actually, go ahead.
Adam, I know you shared a link that was some. Was it
like
on
the top, it was like the top 12 or something of creative time.
There's a lot of creative time lapse stuff going on that was fun.
The one I have is seven videos about how to change architecture, which is, I don't know.
Oh, that's cool.
But do you want to find yours, Adam, and we'll share that on the blog?
Yeah, I'll find it, and yeah, definitely.
That sounds more interesting because it's an interesting. The other one was actually by Brian Dean, who is from Backlinko, and he had an interesting post called Content Upgrade, and the concept, and we'll share. The link will be on the. It's worth reading because it's a little more complex than I'm about to do, but it's an interesting way to increase conversion on your web page.
Actually, the series is the Content Upgrade, right? And then the full post is the How to Boost Conversions by 529% in 45 minutes.
Correct. And
wow.
And so, but what he does is basically, let's say you have he does a couple of things, but he's got a blog post called All Google Ranking Factors, which did really well. And so within the blog post, he does a thing called a content upgrade, and it's like this little yellow box that's on above the fold. It says because there's all this information in there. So he says, here's a checklist. Here's a checklist for you. You can get. And this is, and below it says, plus it includes 2 bonus tips. So not only is it a checklist to make it easier for these people, it has this little upgrade thing where it has 2 bonus tips not included in the post. And then that goes to your, you have to have that connected to your MailChimp or Aweber to do to fulfill that through an autoresponder. But it's a really good post. It's worth reading. It's a clever idea, and I know I'm going to try it on my blog. So.
Hey, Steve, I wanted to give you kudos real quick, public kudos, because you've been so nice to do so in the past for me. You've been sharing some awesome stuff, at minimum on Facebook, because I'm connected with you pretty much everywhere. But on Facebook, I've seen an uptick in awesome stuff, and I saw you share this one as well. So I don't know if you're doing those publicly, but if folks follow you on Facebook or follow you on Twitter, I'd imagine they're going to get a lot of this other cool stuff from you.
Yeah, I've been sharing that just to my. I've been sharing it too. I do share that on my Twitter feed with my other stuff. But those are a special set of things I've been doing for my Facebook personal profile and for my LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, I've been paying a lot more attention to a lot of the stuff you've been sharing over the last few months. So
yeah.
I appreciate it.
That's nice. You're paying attention to Steve because he's awesome.
So lonely.
But, Frank has something that he brought up, and I don't know how you guys feel on time, but I actually think it's pretty interesting and important for folks. Is that cool?
Yeah. Go for it, Frank.
Yeah, the Facebook algorithm change, right? So they're going to eliminate. Let's see, what do they call it? They basically don't want you doing
link baiting.
Yeah.
Clickbaiting.
A giant picture with a bit. They don't like the Bitly links either. Right, so
they don't actually like third-party posting at all anymore. If you post from Hootsuite or Bitly, any of the automated,
buffer.
You're not going to get as much buffer.
They were saying the two primary things was link bait or clickbait, headlines. And then there's a lot of news outlets, at least, and maybe others, but I've been seeing it happen on a lot of news outlets, would put a headline, and then rather than you clicking on the content that gets automatically pulled and embedded into Facebook, they were adding one or more series of short links directly in the description. So they were saying, check out the full video here.
Right.
And so people were getting really crafty with masking the content with a really crazy crop of a photo of some leg or something, but not really showing context, and then using a clickbait title to get people
for folks who may not know. Tell what people are clickbait title means.
Steve Farnsworth went to South by Southwest, and you won't believe what happened. And it's like has absolutely.
And then all you see is a woman in high heels, from the knees down.
Yeah, and
I'm so going to South by.
And it has absolutely no context as to what is going to expect when you click, but I've actually started turning off anybody who uses that in Facebook. I started to completely say, don't show me anything from this publication ever again, because I'm compelled to go look at it. I don't know what it is, but I go and want to see what Steve's doing.
Okay, that's why BuzzFeed works, right?
Exactly.
There's so many of them. Upworthy, BuzzFeed, all of those.
Yeah. I belong to a skydiving group on Facebook that's dedicated to selling used gear. Skydiving gear is very expensive, so it's a good way to get secondhand gear. People like to downsize. You buy your first rig, you get a big one. You might want to downsize in a few months.
Why is it secondhand? Why are they not using that gear anymore?
Because a lot of times when you buy a rig, like say you buy your first rig, right? You'll have a large parachute. Like right now I have a 260. In a year, I might want to downsize because it has better performance, handling, et cetera, et cetera. But you can't downsize right away because that's very dangerous. So I might use it for a year I want to sell it. I could go to this Facebook page and sell it. And what I noticed happening was, and the first time it happened, it was hilarious, but somebody put up a post about, it's a Javelin 240 for sale, whatever the make and model of the gear was, and the photo would be like a photo of a scantily clad woman. Right? And so that was the first one, and it got a bunch of jokes and laughs and stuff. But then it started happening all the time. Right? And so the stream is now just filled with this stuff, and I'm like, all right, it was funny once, but it's not really helpful to people. So it's going to be interesting because this is a group to see if that affects the way the group is displayed.
Well, and they're going to stop. Yeah, they're going to stop showing those. And it was funny. I posted it on LinkedIn. I did a blog post on it, and people came back and rewrote the title for me as to what the link bait title would have been if I'd written a link bait title. So it was pretty fun. But I think it's just another move. And as much as we all trash Facebook every chance we get, this is a positive thing that they've done. They're trying to get rid of this. They know that a lot of people are doing just what Adam did, and they're saying, this isn't cool. Knock it off. And if you do that and you link bait to another site and they don't stay there very long, we're not going to show your posts anymore.
Yeah, and so their decision's based on data. I mean, they talk about it in there, saying this is not just sort of emotional. They asked folks and got their opinion on things.
Yeah, which is kind of shocking, really. On that note, we need to close the show. We could stay and talk with you forever, Frank, because there's so much good stuff to cover.
We love Frank.
And because I'm long-winded.
And because you're long-winded, but you know what?
You make me feel better that you're on the show, Frank. It's okay. Because I'm long-winded, and I need a partner in that.
Here's the thing, folks. Frank actually listens to the show on our iPhone, or is it your Android app?
It's an iPhone. Yeah, the app works fantastic.
He sends messages all the time saying how great the app is and he liked the last show.
What app is that?
We're
having a conversation in the chat where we're talking about what we're talking about. So, what app is that?
We have, for the Friday Hangout, we have an iPhone and an Android app, and the shows are archived there as a podcast, so you can listen to the show live. It usually takes a couple of days to get it up. And
sorry about that.
Gosh, at this rate. So download the iPhone app, download the Android app, whichever one you want. Listen to us on Spreaker, listen to us on iHeartRadio, or come back to YouTube and watch us there and comment, please. We love your comments.
We love your faces. And subscribe to Frank's blog, Sword and Script and Sword.
I was just going there. So Frank, where can people find you?
swordandthescript.com. That's my pride and joy. It's where I put most of my effort into. And if you look next Tuesday, there will be an interview posted with one of the people on this panel.
Ooh, who could that be?
Probably a loser.
And speaking of that probable
it's a great interview.
Steve, why don't you tell us where people can find you until Tuesday?
What? They can find me at stevefarnes.wordpress.com, or you can find me on Twitter at Steveology.
And Adam?
You can find me pretty much anywhere at Secret Sushi, secretsushi.com, and Adam Helway.
Great, and I'm Janet Fouts. You can find me at janetfouts.com or jfouts on Twitter. Have a great day, everybody, and thanks.
Take care.